step back, and say, you don't want to fight me, I'm a pussy. And this is true, and I thought for years, I was like, I'm gonna take that shit to the grave. I think a real defining moment for me was in middle school. This kid, Chris, challenged me to a fight. For him to enter into a gang, he had to get into a fight. So some people told me about this thing, and I'm like, well, why would I do that? Well, I've never gotten in a fight. You think I'm gonna fight in front of a whole fucking gang and do all this shit, And so I immediately was like, of course I'm not gonna do this. My brother happened to be around, who's an older brother. He was with a friend, Justin, and his mom. And his mom said, you have to do this. And my dad died when I was a little kid, and I don't have any memory of him. I had never had a male mentor in my life. But she said, you gotta do this. Justin said, you gotta do this. My brother said, you gotta do this. Hey, you're strong. And I'm thinking, I can't believe you guys are fucking tricking me into doing this. She drives me to the fight in her white Econoline van. And I remember getting out of this van, my heart was beating 1,000,000 miles a fucking minute. I see him, I see it looked like 30 people, I'm sure it was 15 behind him. And I remember walking up to him really fast. And I remember I'm just gonna give it everything I got. And I came a mile fucking back here, and I was probably a mile away from this guy. And I swung so fucking hard, I threw myself to the ground. So I'm on the ground. He's coming up to me, to kick me. And everyone wore steel-toe boots back then. And so he's coming up to kick me. And as he's coming up to kick me, I picked him up and I manhandled him. And I realized how fucking strong I am. And then I was able to mount him. And I was able to pin his elbows, his arms under my knees. And I had my left hand on his neck, and I had my right hand cocked back, and I looked in his eyes. And I saw how helpless, how hopeless, how pathetic, how scared he was. And I saw myself. And I couldn't fucking do it. I couldn't do it. And I remember getting up, kind of running back to the van. And when I got in, everyone was kind of proud of me. Everyone...
What do you make of this story? Can I say something? You were in 5th grade. Everyone wore steel-toe boots back then. and the reason you were getting in a fight is that you heard through the grapevine that a man was getting into a gang, a 5th grade gang. And the initiation was that he had to attack this guy who was already being picked on by everybody. In what world does this happen? Sorry, what is going on? When I was talking about people picking on me earlier, I thought he was in an older age. Like 5th grade is still very young. And by that time, I don't think anyone's so much bigger than somebody else that you can't just fight back, to be honest. But anyway, that doesn't matter. But the thing is this story real? What do you mean there was a gang? Where were you living? Isn't he also from some kind of wealth or something? He has some mysterious financial background. So he wasn't growing up in Watts. But if he was growing up in Watts, let me say, just if he was in Watts, 10-year-olds may be like running some drugs for somebody, but they're not like hunting down people and getting, jumped into gangs. Maybe they are, honestly, but it's usually 13. Like 10, they were 10 or 11, and he was in his neighborhood, and there was a gang, and they selected the weak kid to fight on a one-on-one with the other guy to get in the gang. This doesn't even make sense. Gangs don't do this. There's not a one-on-one with an enemy. It's like they jump each other. It's not about gangs. I'm just saying, is this a false story?
Here's what I think when I hear this story. First, I think whether it's false or real, if it's ingrained in his mind that it happened, or like the emotions that came out of it were real, then it's a helpful tool to understand how he thinks. Right? He may have perceived it that way, and the facts may be completely different, but his perception of what happened and how it affected him is what matters. Whenever, ever since there's been a lot of politicians that tell stories that are great. It's like their content writer, their public relations manager wrote this story. Like, tell this story, it'll make you more relatable, and it's memorable. It'll make some good sound bites for the media. And I think it was Joe Biden who did this. I think he went on his on this tour, and he's telling all these stories. They all ended up to be completely false stories. like they check also, like, what is he talking about? None of this happened. It's completely made up. It's written by a publicist. But they practice it, they deliver it. They even start to believe these fake stories that are created. I'm not saying that's what happened with Liver King, but whenever you're listening to the media and like a touching story and like, oh wow, I can really relate.
He said that did happen here, because he said after the debacle happened to him originally, I think we might hear, I don't know if we'll hear this, but he said that they called in a public relations team, and they gave him a document to say, and he decided that's not him. He can't do this kind of thing that sweeps us under the rug. So he came to tell all. But I know that he did approach many podcast stations apparently. But he first made he was reading his apology with his shirt off. So I think that was the public relations one.
You know how much better this would be for my health.
Yeah.
You know, again, there's maybe we'll talk about more of the silver linings, but
Yeah, the worst thing for primal lifestyle is dying at 50.
yeah,
Well, like, the worst thing for the
trust
brand.
me, I've thought about that. I'm like, okay, what if this guy dies at 50? What do you think people are going to think about that?
It's like Atkins.
Liver King here says, I've thought about that. What if I die at 50? Which is really interesting. I always wondered if some of the bodybuilders that are pushing their physiques a little bit into their 40s or 50s, like doing it a bit excessively, if they ever think like, oh, if I die, nobody will, I mean, you can't say, oh, you were lying or you were pushing something, or do they ever wonder how it'll affect their legacy or their message? Not that they're all doing it intentionally, and a lot of it's happening by accident, but it's interesting to think he did think that. And
So I'm an advocate
so
of.
he thought he was really risking his health.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But he was talking about ancestral living as being healthy, but also better for
Yeah.
for he was basically pitching it as a happiness thing, right?
Well, his steroid cycle was ridiculous, if you ask me. It just was
Weird.
not optimized.
No.
So I would say, yeah, after experiencing that, you would say that steroids are not healthy. But then, you know, a year and a half ago, whenever he was reaching out to coaches, he must have landed some good advice somewhere along the way where he realized you could use steroids healthfully, where it's not going to impact the length of your life very much. Because there's so many things within this class of like steroids and performance
There's a
enhancing
lot of
drugs you could use. You could use peptides, you could use SARMs, you can use lower dosages of all these things. There's so many ways to do it. You can't say like this stuff is unhealthy.
No.
Generally.
No. You can. There's one reason you could think that way, which is there's a theory that like, so think of this: women live longer than men. Men live longer, and women both live shorter lives than eunuchs if they become eunuchs before they get to sexual procreation. There's an idea that the longer it takes to get to sexual maturity, the longer the species ages, and also potentially that some organisms, when they do have children, reduce their life expectancy of the organism. Remember, we're optimized to have the children. So,
No matter what with this amount, it's
So-
like having too much muscle is
so
going to shorten your life
other thing-
anyways.
yeah, and the other thing is also the growth hormones being potentially for cancer being an issue, but for your health, organ health can be the opposite. I'm not saying, but what I'm saying is really what Tony's saying is there's wide ranges of how much dangerous it can be. It can be probably will never influence your life, especially if the right genetics for it, for cellular repair and stuff. Or it could be that you're doing something that's going to kill you, unfortunately, maybe before you're 30 or in your 40s, you know?